Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch, and today you're in for quite a treat. I just wrapped up a conversation with Branlin Shockey that is going to touch your heart. It really, I'm still kind of a buzz from this. Just a wonderful, wonderful conversation with just a beautiful human. That's how his father described him. When I told him I was going to be interviewing him, he's like, he's a beautiful human. And, I think we are able to shed light on that today, and his kind of approach to filmmaking. I first learned about, Branlin through his work with his father, through The Professionals, and then later on Uncharted, Uncharted Yukon, and some of the films that they had done together, which, lasted multiple seasons. And he also did a reality show for a season with his sister, Eva, and that was incredible as well. There's been so many things he's contributed to, some wonderful films, and we really kind of focused a lot on the two more recent ones. One is called Once We Were Wolves with Cameron Haynes, which is just in and of itself a must watch. Check out the show links below and in the notes here, and make sure you go check that out. Profound film. And the most recent one that came out, a little over a month and a half ago, called Gone, which is kind of a documentary of Jim Shockey's life, and just really talking about his legacy, his approach, and what it is that he hopes to leave behind. There's so many things that, we chat about too with Branlin and I today, where a lot of those were unscripted moments, and he was given, in both of those cases, the opportunity to really just go in there and to film without having a predisposed idea of how the show is going to go, and just really kind of to see how this emerges and what comes from, the filming, and from putting in that time and recording, these interviews, and, in the case with Cam, the hunt. And I really feel like those are two really good examples of what Branlin is capable of doing, and which is just putting out some amazing films that will touch your heart, touch your soul, leave you thinking, and leave you wanting more of that kind of authentic films that he does. Man, I'm just blown away by the conversation we had today. We really dove in deep, and I think you get a really good taste of who Branlin is, and the love and respect and honor that he puts in to this beautiful work that he does and that he shares with us all. So make sure you're checking out the show notes. Check out those films. Go follow Branlin on Instagram for the announcements of what's next. He's got a website that he's working on right now, and that'll be coming out soon, that he hints at, and I'm sure he'll be announcing that. So make sure you're following him so you learn about it when it does. You can check it out, and you can check out all the amazing things he's done and been a part of. Once again, thank you, Branlin, for joining me today. It was truly an honor and a privilege to sit down with you. I had such an amazing time, and I know that all the listeners and watchers are going to love this podcast. So without further ado, here is my interview with Branlin Shockey. Y'all enjoy. Hey, Branlin, how you doing today, man?
Doing great, George. How you doing?
Fantastic. Listen, I'm really excited to talk to you. Want to dive into a lot of the projects you've been involved in, talk about some music, all your film work, but I kind of want to start, at the very beginning and kind of give a little 101 background to the listeners. So if you can maybe talk to me a little bit about, where you grew up and, how you found your way. Obviously, you kind of have a unique story into working with, some of your film work and kind of being involved in the outdoor space. So if you don't mind kind of starting us off there, and we'll just dive in as we go.
Yeah, it sounds great. Cool. First of all, thank you for having me on today. This is very exciting. I appreciate it. It's funny. I was just like half an hour ago, I was filling out this online form for this company, and they're asking, what's my experience in the firearms industry and the hunting industry. And they said, how long have you been involved in the industry? And I was trying to come up with a number, and I just put, since I was born, like smiley face on the form, because I mean, I've been involved in the hunting industry, the outdoor industry, since I can remember. Some of my earliest memories are, and this is probably illegal actually, but I had a little like BB gun my dad got me, and he'd be working at his desk, typing, and I'd be like under his desk firing the BB gun at these little boxes full of like pieces of cardboard and stuff inside the house. So, yeah, I grew up in the outdoor industry, obviously, and I strayed a little bit from that when I got into high school and university. I kind of went through that phase where I didn't necessarily appreciate, let's see, didn't necessarily appreciate the environment that I grew up in. And I thought, I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to live in a city and wear a suit and tie. So I went to university for business but I ended up coming back in the fold a few years later.
Well, how did you find that your foothold? Because I know, obviously growing up with your father being kind of an icon in the outdoor industry, there can be some pressure, I'm sure, for, kind of following in those footsteps. And then, like you said, too, you kind of wanted to move into something else, but you found your way back into that, but in the role of a storyteller and doing film work. So I was kind of curious, like, how that came to be that you found that being a driving passion that you wanted to kind of really spend some time and, jump into and run with.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. Let's see. So first of all, yes, growing up with Jim Shockey as your dad is interesting. And looking back, I now have perspective on that. But yeah, when a guy like that, when Jim Shockey is your dad, you're never going to be, manlier than Jim Shockey. You're never going to be tougher than your dad. You're never going to, I'm talking about perspective now, right?
Sure, sure.
You're never going to be, I'm never going to travel the world and do more hunting than dad has. It's almost impossible. And so as a son, and I think this is, relatively common. I mean, you do compare yourself to your dad. I mean, he's your hero. He's the person you want to be like. But for me, following dad's footsteps exactly was never an option. And I knew that pretty early on. I was like, oh, well, dad, you're sitting on that whitetail stand for 30 days straight to kill that deer. I don't want to do that. That's crazy. I mean, it's cool. It's epic, and it's, all the power to you. And I respect what you do, but man, I don't know that I have that passion. And if you don't have that passion, you're never going to be able to do what someone like my dad has done in the industry. So, I was never a storyteller as a kid that I can recall. I was a numbers kid. I was into techie, geeky stuff. I was, just a kid, nothing crazy special. I don't think any of my English teachers would be like, oh, wow, he showed so much promise as a kid telling stories. That was more something that I discovered. And I was, I would film with dad growing up. So he would, and this is incredible. And I'm so blessed to have this opportunity because, I recognize this is not normal, but he'd pull me out of school and we'd go, to Africa or to Australia on these trips with him or New Zealand. And so I had a lot of worldly exposure, but I was just holding a camera and I was shooting video and I wasn't thinking much of it. So I would never, it was just a job to me. And I hate to say that, but I never gave it the, again, I was a kid. I didn't grasp the opportunities that were handed to me as when I was younger. So we come back and the footage was fine. I did whatever I could and pass it off and no big deal. Nothing came of that. But then, once graduated university and I started looking around and saying, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Like how can I do something a little more than just, get drunk with my buddies on Thursdays and go out to the bars. Dad, at that point, what he was doing, I came back into the fold. I started talking more about his outlook on life and like how, he looks at challenges as something that you should pursue. The bigger the challenge, the greater the reward. And it, really to an extreme level, right? Sure. And I started reading things like some of the Ayn Rand books at that time, like The Fountainhead. That really got, I look back at it now, it's a little bit stilted writing, but she was brilliant and she changed my life at that time. And I said, okay, I want to do something like Howard Roark. Like I want to go and build something incredible, make something incredible. And the opportunity at that point was sort of a fork in the road. I could go into finance and I could try and do something incredible there, which I'm very happy I did not take that route. Or I could go into the outdoor space and I could try and figure out how to make a mark there, how to build something like, I'm sorry to any listeners who are not familiar with Howard Roark. He's a character in The Fountainhead. But hopefully you are. And if you're not, I'd highly recommend that book. It changed my life. I wanted to go and do something different. I wanted to make my mark on the industry. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was to just throw caution to the wind and try and make something cool in the storytelling space, in the outdoor space. And again, not everybody has these opportunities, of course, but for me, it wasn't that difficult to get my foot in the door at that point and get an opportunity to make something. And so I did. And I poured my heart and soul truly into the project, and that became the Professionals season 1.
So in the Professional season 1, I know that your dad came to you and he had the footage there. That was when he was in Pakistan. That's early '09,
Yeah.
and you then were going to be in charge of kind of putting together that story and taking I guess you weren't a part of the filming of that, right? Didn't you have all the footage given to you?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, which is a whole different world than kind of, dreaming this idea up and then kind of running with it, which I know you've done in other projects too. So, what did that look like for you as far as, okay, it sounds like, if you don't have a ton of the editing experience, there's kind of a learning curve there. What did that look like for you to kind of get all this and be like, all right, now I'm going to put this together? Or did you have some background and experience kind of being around it from that exposure? What did that look like?
Yeah, I did have a little bit of experience because when Dad started his original series, which was Hunting Adventures, I was around when that started. So I would sit there with the editor and watch him as he was working on putting the series together. And his name that was Cody Robbins, and he basically put that together from scratch. Him and another guy named Jesse Reardon, and they learned, as they were putting that together, they went through all the hurdles that I would eventually go through. So I watched them go through that process, and then I knew at that point that to make a show was possible, and you did not have to go to film school for a bunch of years. You didn't have to be some super genius person to do it necessarily. I mean, obviously, I'm not, but clearly, Cody will love this. But clearly, if Cody Robbins, if you could do that series by yourself, clearly you don't need to be a super genius. Uh, that's kind of an inside thing. He's an amazing guy and a good friend.
Yes, a nice little kidney punch to friends. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I knew that it was possible, and that's kind of. But I also knew that I was quite naive going into it. And so, yeah, we had all this footage, and I basically just had to. You asked what it looked like. It looked like a lot of me sitting at a desk, like we're doing now, and watching, early day YouTube videos on how to edit and how to put things together and call people if I got stuck. And then, and this is again where I got a little bit lucky at this point. I was not interested in making a hunting show because that wasn't my passion. So what I did in my spare time was, I'd watch Guy Ritchie movies,
Right.
Things like that. And so and again, being completely naive, I was like, well, shoot, why don't I just bring some elements of like that kind of editing style, quicker cuts, kind of more music driven stuff, some more character stuff, less focus on like the kill shot. Why don't I bring that into the hunting industry? Isn't that like a cool idea? And, again, I'm a kid. I've got nothing to lose, and I'm naive as heck. So I think, okay, this might actually work. I don't know. It's what I would want to see. And so that's what I did. So I learned how to edit, put it all together. And then I remember, let's see, that was the Pakistan episode was episode 1. And it was a pilot. We're going to send that pilot off to the channel and they're going to look at it. And my dad came over and we watched it together. And I can't remember exactly, but I remember thinking like at that point, like, oh, okay, maybe we have made something that's, if nothing else, maybe not good, but it's very unique at that point.
Well, I think it was both good and unique. I just watched kind of the episode a few weeks ago, just kind of, start from that point.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was great.
I'm sure it's dated. Yeah.
It's I've seen so many different things that you've been a part of. And, if you wouldn't mind just touching base on some of those things, you've done a lot of work with your dad on some of those, but you've also done other things. You've worked with your sister there too. If you want to just mind, maybe kind of give some folks who might want to go and see some of the work you've been a part of, maybe some of those titles that you've been a part of, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So Professionals was the first series I did. And that was, again, started with that Pakistan episode. That was a pilot, went off to the channel, and they thought it was, again, I don't know if they said it was good, but they definitely said it was unique and different. And so I kind of rolled the dice and hit sixes or whatever, and we did great. And so that series came back, and that series did very well. We won all, a bunch of awards for that back when outdoor TV was you didn't back, and this is dating myself, but back then, you couldn't just go fine hunting stuff all over the place. So it's not
Sure.
like it is now. So TV was a big deal. And so Professionals ran for 4 seasons, and I didn't start filming really until a little bit in season 2, and then season 3 was really where like I got that chance to pick up a camera again and go back to places like Nepal with being very intentional about what I was doing. So because now you've got a successful series, but you're going now every season is new. And by the way, especially in those days, if you do something unique and different, you can only do that for 1 year, and then the next year everybody else has seen what you're doing, and now all of a sudden like you're hearing the same music tracks you used, and everybody's cutting differently. And so I always wanted to try and like stay ahead of all that. I was always in my mind, and whether this is real or not, I'm not sure, but I always thought, there's people hungrier than I am, people that want this worse than I do, that are coming up, that are going to take over what we're trying to do. I'm trying to make the best. At that point, I was trying to make the best content I could, make my mark in the industry. And I was thinking, well, I got to get better and better and better every year, or else people are going to catch up. So I went very intentionally into season 3, and that was, we made a series on Nepal, or was it a 4-episode, like a mini series on Nepal. And that became the pilot for a different show called Uncharted, which was it's kind of like Professionals, but it was more intentionally shot.
Mhm.
So Professionals were taking a lot of footage that was just kind of handed to us, and then we're kind of weaving stories through it. But Uncharted, like I was going on most of the trips, especially in season 1, and we were shooting, with the purpose of making these longer format, more cinematic, story-driven, character-driven episodes. So anyway, Professionals, 4 seasons. Uncharted ran for, I think, maybe 7 seasons. I think we went into Uncharted Yukon for the last 2, so we kind of focused on the Utah territory, which was really, really cool and different, because Dad wasn't traveling as much then. And also, by the way, I'm not trying to take credit for all the filming of these things, because I did not film the majority of these episodes. A lot of these were filmed by an absolute badass. His name is Matt Zanil, and some other cameraman as well. But I couldn't, what Dad does, where he travels 300 days a year, at that time, I just, I wasn't able to do that and still be sane. I was losing my mind a little bit. So
Sure.
so we did anyway. So I'll shorten this up, but yeah, those series. I did just a 1 season, or no, 2 seasons with Ivan Carter on a show called Carter's War,
Mm-hmm.
and I was following like anti-poaching operations in Africa. Then we did a season called My Outdoor Family with my sister, which actually I think it could have been a successful series, but it kind of wasn't. And again, this is, when I say like I was naive, like I really was naive, and I would just do things because I thought they were cool. And I thought, well, reality shows kind of suck. I don't like watching them. So let's just show up without a plan, and let's just, follow Eva around for a bit with her husband and their young family, and show their dedication to their businesses and the outdoor lifestyle and their family. And I thought that would do great, and it didn't. It had bad ratings. So naivety isn't necessarily a good thing. It's nice because it doesn't prevent you from trying different things, but those things can definitely fail. So I did that, and then I don't know if that was about the time. No, it was probably a little earlier than when COVID hit. But I started a family. We bought a house up in Vancouver Island, and then we went through all the COVID stuff, and then recently we started, or a couple of years ago, we started a show called American Made. And so that's me being a little bit less naive and saying, okay, how do we actually create value? Like, how do we be creatives, but create value at the same time? And how do we maximize that? So I try to think of stories that we could tell that are not just interesting stories to viewers necessarily, but also interesting and valuable to people that ultimately, fund creative endeavors. And a lot of the times those are brands. So American Made is essentially, it's kind of like a chef's table idea, but it follows it's telling stories about American entrepreneurs and companies making products in America, and what goes into that. And it's not like a how it's made thing, like how things come together. I think that's cool, but that's been done, and that's a technical approach. We're more looking at the people, like why does Pete Roberts, for instance, how can he start Origin, which is making camo clothing in America? are making, sorry, not just camel, but jeans and
Yeah,
boots
yeah,
and
yeah.
keys and everything. Like, how does he? What possesses someone to do that? Because I was told in business school that it's not possible to make clothes in America, nor should we even consider it. And there is Pete just crushing it over there and making it happen and proving all my professors wrong. So we would try and focus on those stories. We're looking at the people at that point.
Well, I think that's so rich to do that, and there's so many amazing stories to be told. And I was, thinking about that too with all your traveling and your experience, and how much culture and different people and belief systems and just the
Yeah.
way of life you were exposed to, and how that element that comes into play in a lot of these films is that human element, right? It's not just the, hey, we're going to show the sponsor, we're going to do the, like, it's you telling the stories of those people that are behind where you're traveling to and getting a piece of that. And your dad has been involved in that as well a lot, and talking about that. It's been a huge thing to see that human element. I think that's such an important thing to bring into play.
Yeah, I mean, to me personally, like that is what is interesting about being alive. It's
Yep.
not. I mean, I like technical stuff. I like collecting guitars and
Hmm.
things, and but ultimately, to me, what's interesting about life is people, right? Like what stories you can kind of uncover if you dig a little bit, and storytelling is really cool because you can. Let me think. I was talking to another guy the other day about how to interview somebody, and you probably, I'm sure, I mean, you've done, this is your 88th episode,
Yep.
correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so you're familiar with this, but for American Made especially, we have to sit down with a lot of people, and these are you know big time people, like people that are powerful and that have 45 minutes to sit with you, and that's it. That's all you're getting. And then they're jetting off to the next big meeting or whatever they're doing. And the last thing I want to do, especially when they're spending money, is to come off as you know not knowing what I'm talking about or not being respectful or saying the wrong thing. But at the same time, I want to prod them in ways that gets a story. Otherwise, they're going to regurgitate the same stuff they would normally do in a corporate video, which is frankly stale, right? We've heard
Yeah.
it a million times and our eyes glaze over, and that's bad for, I think it's bad for the company, but it's also bad for the series. It's bad for me. So I try and focus on, what I try and get them to look at what they do in a little bit of a different perspective, similar to, say, yesterday I was driving down the highway, I was going 75 miles an hour. I don't think twice about it. And neither does anybody else on the highway. Don't give a second thought. But if you're telling a story about that, I would say, well, okay, what were you carrying in your truck? And I had my two kids, and other than my wife, those are my two most valuable possessions, my two most valuable things in the planet.
Yep.
And here I am driving down a highway 75 miles an hour in a 5,000 pound truck, and there's 6,000 pound vehicles coming at me the other way. And all it takes is literally 1 second of not paying attention and touching the steering wheel in the wrong way or whatever. And, I can lose everything. So I try and find, and I'm using like an extreme example, obviously,
Sure.
because we know that like driving isn't like that big of a deal, but I do feel like most of us go through our lives in that kind of neutral mode, and we're just driving along and with the cruise control on, and we don't think about what is really interesting necessarily about our lives and about other people's lives and how we interact with people and the decisions we make. I mean, they matter. Um, and if you look at it in the right angle, I think that's the key to making things, helping to move people, right, to creating emotion with in viewers.
Well, while you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of, the film Once We Were Wolves, where you're going with Cam Haines and retracing some steps with his friend Roy, who had passed away, and kind of thinking about those moments that are there. Then all of a sudden, it takes one misstep, and then everyone's lives around you have changed. If you're that person, you're not there any longer to see how that affects everyone, right? It's like that is that film was very powerful in multiple ways for me, just in the way that you guys told that, you directing that was just so profound. And for those who have not had the chance to watch that yet, I will have it in the show notes and the link below, and I highly suggest everyone check that out. And I want to dive into a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into Gone, the most recent one you've directed. But if you can kind of tell me a little bit about how that film started, like how did you, is this something that Cam approached you? Did you approach him with the idea? I want to know about the genesis of that idea, and then maybe if you can kind of give everyone a little bit of background about what that film was, and maybe we'll dive into a little bit of the sequence of events there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that film started actually with a phone call from Kip Fulks. So Kip is a co-founder of Under Armour, and I could talk about Kip for hours. He's one of my favorite people on earth. Actually, he's really, really, really interesting guy. He's someone that literally climbed the corporate ladder to the very pinnacle, just about, of and created a $5 billion company out of like him in a garage with the other founder. I mean, that's it. Making 20 grand a year. So went from that to billions of dollars and literally hit what I was taught in university, which was, you've made it. Like this is our dream. This is our goal. You've got all the power on the planet. You're hanging out with the billionaires. You're living the billionaire lifestyle. And Kip wasn't. He got out of all that and he decided that wasn't what he wanted. And he kind of turned his back to it all, left it. If you talk to Kip now, meet Kip now, he won't mention the Under Armour stuff. He won't talk about money or anything like that. You won't even know he has money really, unless you're riding around in his truck or seeing his house or whatever. But he's not, he doesn't
It
act
doesn't
like
define him, right?
no, that doesn't define
Yeah.
him. So
Yeah.
so really interesting right there. But he wants to, and he'll say this in the film, but he wants to be a mountain man. And that's what he wants to be remembered for, not for the corporate stuff he did. So he'd always been a fan of Cam Hanes, right? Because Cam really like epitomizes that, who Kip wants to be. And these are all things I didn't really know at the time, but we ended up discovering that during the filming process. But Kip called me up and said, "Hey, I hardly knew Kip. I think I talked to him like once, maybe." And he said, "Hey, me and Cam Hanes are going to come on a bear hunt. You want to come film it?" And I get asked that a lot, right? Like people are saying, "Hey, like, you want to come film my hunt?" And it's no every time, because it's just not what I want to do necessarily. I think hunting's incredible. I want to tell great hunting stories, but usually that's not what it is. It's usually just a hunt. And I've been on a lot of those.
Yeah.
And so for me, it isn't, it's not necessarily, I don't find it that inspiring. Now, Kip Fulks and Cam going on a trip is inspiring to me and is different. And I thought, okay, let's, yeah, absolutely. So I told him I was in, no pay or anything like that. I didn't have to pay for the trip other than the flights. But other than that, it just wasn't like I charged Kip a bunch of money or anything. And he said, "Okay, let's go." And I didn't hear from him again until like right before we were going to leave. And he sent me this list of stuff to get, what was going to keep me alive up there. And we flew up and I didn't have a plan. And, we went back to like, again, me being naive and kind of like embracing that. But sometimes I do feel like, yeah, you'll strike out, but sometimes it works and works really well. And it's better actually. Like if I would have spent, bunch of days doing all this pre-planning and calling these guys and trying to figure out like what we're going to film, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that it would have come together like it did, because I'd always be trying to steer the story into something that it wasn't. So we showed up and, it's a 10-day hunt or whatever up there. And I just kind of kept the camera rolling and tried my best not to get too caught up in being present. And which is kind of unfortunate and anybody who films probably knows this, but if you get too caught up like being where you're at and saying, "Oh wow, this is so incredible," and like, start having a good time and telling jokes and stuff, I think you do a little bit of a disservice to what you're really there for, which is to capture like what's going on without you present. So I would Cam would wake up in the morning, we got stuck in this crazy blizzard for like 4 days in the beginning. So Cam would wake up in the morning and Kip, and we'd all be in the same tent together. And I'd just be filming from like the second they woke up to, essentially the second we went to sleep at night. And it was crazy because I'd film hours and hours and hours, but I didn't know what I was going to get. So anybody who's looking to capture, content in the same style that I would do, I guess, is one piece of advice is certainly film the stuff that you should be looking at, the stuff that most people find boring right away. Don't look at like everybody thinks, oh, if it's a hunt film, well, let's just keep the camera off until you start stalking the grizzly bear or you're going on a hunt in the morning. And all the best stuff, the stuff that I remember, and I think this is true for most hunters, is you remember the stories you guys were telling around the campfires. You remember the camaraderie you had after like day 6 and you're hanging your head at night because you haven't seen anything in that many days. And it's just been a grind and and your boots are wet and you don't want to put them back on in the morning and walk back up that mountain. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to capture. And you don't get that during the day. You get it in the off hours, when people are, I think a little bit more, I don't know what the term is. They're not relaxed, but they're just more open. right? They've forgotten about the camera. They're you find there's a sense of like truth that comes out, I think, during those times, and I tried to capture that during the film. So I don't know if I was answering. I can't even remember what your question was now, but
Yeah, just I was that was great because I wanted to kind of know how you got involved with going in that, and then
mhm,
the idea of kind of what there was an element there of shining a light on the legacy of Roy and the
mhm,
friendship of him and Cam and what that meant and how many years they spent together, and going on these journeys that were further and pushing themselves more than others. And I was kind of curious too, what you kind of mentioned it is like you didn't have that plan going into that. Like you were there in the moment and being present, capturing what you could, and those non exciting moments where you're sitting there, in a camp. You got the blizzard going on, which those, like you said too, those are some of those golden moments that come out from that. Because I think too, a lot of the times when the hunts, those focus on before, like you said too, they're setting up for the kill shot. Okay, now you got your grip and grin. That's not the important stuff. It's all the things leading up to afterwards, campfire, those moments and those authentic conversations come out. So that kind of played to part of that. And I was curious if like you knew the level of maybe, Cam wanting to give a nod to Roy because obviously you went to his house there too. He's going back through Roy's room, and it was very emotional because he hadn't been back to Alaska since Roy had passed away. And so this was a very monumental hunt for him, one that he had put off for a while, as he talked about. So I was kind of curious, as part of that, I was going to have a follow-up question is how much were you aware of what you were capturing? Was there an element of that at play that you knew about, or was that something that there was a discovery upon your journey there with him?
yeah. No, I did not know that that was going to happen on the trip. I actually did not know. I don't think I knew that that was Cam's first time back to Alaska after losing his best friend. So, and I do want to say something quickly, like just a shout out to Cam, okay, because a lot of people from on my side of the lens anyway, I'm looking for vulnerability, and my production partner Caleb says this all the time, but being vulnerable is something that actually people respect,
Hmm.
and I think it's pretty common for like the tough guys out there, right, to think, oh, I don't want to be vulnerable, I don't want to shed a tear, I don't want to laugh at jokes and things like that, I want to be stoic all the time. And if you watch the film, none of that is me ever telling Cam, hey, like, I need you to be emotional here, or I need you to like say something here. I'm just following around and I'm observing. So there's no, other than keeping the camera rolling and maybe some particular shots or whatever, there's no credit that goes my way on that. That's just Cam being Cam. And if you know Cam well, and I know him pretty well, not as well as his family, but I know him well. That's just him. He is vulnerable, and he's not afraid to show that. And so that's, he cared about Roy a lot. Roy had a tremendous impact on Cam's life, and Cam lost him, and he'll never get him back. And so there was that element going on. And then for me also, a little more subtly, I think, and I don't know if I did the best job of showing this, but looking at Kip now, trying to be like Cam in the same way that Cam was trying to be like Roy, that's really what I tried to focus on. And this is not, again, not me at the moment when they're talking in camp trying to put this together. It's just me kind of gradually putting that together as the hunt goes on, and we're headed back, and flying back home and thinking about what really did I just witness, and what's, how do I take that 80 hours of footage and condense it down to what I think the essence of it was. And to me, it's that camaraderie, right? It's Cam and Roy, and then it's Kip and Cam, and eventually there's going to be someone following Kip now. It's so, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm just trying to distill what I think is the most pertinent and powerful essence of a journey, and then into 60 minutes where I think it comes across.
Well, I love that you talk about too, like you're capturing and then you're putting it together. Because I think when sometimes people force their own narrative or their own direction, and I mean, as a filmmaker, as a director, I mean, there's a certain point, depending on what it is you're trying to put out, that you have to kind of maybe have certain sequences or shots or things you're going to do if you're telling this story. But if you are just kind of you know, throwing it on record and then seeing what comes of that, then you're kind of through that experience, you realize that it is how you want to edit that and shape it. And I think you did a tremendous amount of service towards that story about, brotherhood, about friendship, about the challenges, and just the realities of what that looks like too. And because obviously it's not just it condensed down to that one, pulling back shot, and that, there was a lot that went to it. And I don't know if we want to necessarily spoil, the ending there for everybody and as far as what happened, but it was a very emotional hunt for him in multiple ways leading up to it, and then as far as what happened and how that ultimately that hunt ended. And I think, I was curious too, because I think there was a time where, you know Cam, I was curious, was that something where he was a little reluctant to, maybe have that film kind of go because obviously of how, the end, the kill ended up happening? Or was there a part of that that, he just kind of left it to your hands and your devices to put that together? Because obviously I knew that was a difficult way for how it ended. And I was curious as far as how that interplay was with you guys and working on that film. Once that film was done, and what did that look like for you? And you said 80 hours of film. I was curious how long it took for that editing of that, because that's a big amount of footage to go through.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. Uh, Cam says, and I won't ruin the film, but Cam does say in that film that, he's willing to die. Right.
Mhm.
And what he's really talking about is he's willing to die for his beliefs, which is, he wants to go hunt a grizzly bear. Okay. And he recognizes that, he's not just doing that for food. He's doing it for other reasons too. And there's an element there's kind of like a warrior sort of element here where, that grizzly bear can turn around and can kill Cam. That's a possibility. It may not be very likely, but it's certainly there. And Cam is okay with that. So he said at one point that he is okay with that. He's ready to die. And I can tell you from knowing Cam that he's not just saying that. Cam means it. He really does mean that. And I've seen comments and stuff online. Cam means this, Cam means this, Cam doesn't mean that, or, whatever. He's just trying to act tough. That's not true. Whatever his motivations are, Cam 100% meant that. And so the issue for him was that he was put in a position where, well, actually, he feels like, and I'm speaking for Cam now, obviously, I'm not meaning to put words in his mouth, so take this as you may, but I feel like he holds himself to an extremely high standard. And he does that for his own personal reasons, but also because he loves bow hunting. He loves the sport of bow hunting. He loves sports. A terrible word I hate sport. Loves the bow hunting lifestyle and everything that it represents. And so to him go out there, to him put all this energy into being the best he possibly can be, not just for himself, but for bow hunting and for the respect he has for the animal on the other side of that arrow. And then to, not potentially perform up to that standard and then have, guns and things involved, which is part of hunting. And, I believe as a non-resident Alaska, you just have to have that.
Yep.
That was hard for him to swallow because I think he felt like he was letting people down, right? He was letting the bow hunting, his passion down, the only thing he cares about outside of family, like he was letting that down. So yeah, he definitely, that film was ready for quite a while. I mean, I was going to at least 6 months or longer. And he wasn't sure if he wanted to release it for that reason. He didn't want to tarnish bow hunting.
What was that then decision that clipped like for him? Was that a conversation that happened, or one day he just said, let's run it? Like, how did that come about? Because obviously I could tell that the hesitation for a little while after it was done. What did it look like from that point to then, okay, we're going to put it out and we're going to hit go?
I actually don't know. I think maybe Kip had talked to him, and I know I had talked to him a little bit, but I certainly wasn't me that made that happen. You'd have to talk to Cam.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if he's, maybe when he comes on, ask him.
Yeah.
I want to say it was him talking with Kip, or maybe he talked with Joe Rogan a little bit about it. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But certainly at some point he decided to go for it. And it wasn't a small thing for him. Like he's just very passionate about it, and he wanted to make sure that he's doing what, I don't know what the words are. He's
honoring,
being the best version. Yeah. The best. He wants to honor that lifestyle, and he wants to be the best for all those reasons we already listed. And
And for those who don't know, about Cam and his journey too, I'll have some notes there below. But he is by far one of the most extreme, um, you know, athletes. But he pushes himself to be able to get further in the woods, to be able to have the most authentic experience. And his dedication, his practice, and shooting every day is to make sure that he honors that animal and that time spent to where he's going to be the most ethical and lethal with what he does. And so that kind of leads up to our conversation. And I'll have again the link in the show notes because it's an incredible film. I thought you did such an amazing job putting that together. The filming of it was amazing. The story, everything all around, man. I think it was such an important thing, and I'm so glad that he finally hit the green light on that because I think it shows a lot about him. Like we said too, the camaraderie, the brothership, the hunt, the honoring of the animals and the landscape, and what a beautiful, amazing spot. Well, minus the 4 days where you're stuck in the tent, maybe
Yeah.
you don't get to see as much there. I think there's probably visibility was like a foot, right? But it's like you guys
Yeah.
talk about it, you're like I can't even see. But it was an amazing film, and I just wanted to say thank you for what you did with that. You did an amazing job. Moving on to another one, your most recent that you did was Gone.
Yeah.
Very profound, man. I mean, I found myself watching this multiple times, having, a little bit of experience of meeting and chatting with your dad and having him on when we talked about, his book and, what he was going through at that point in time. And, when your mother was sick and then to see this film and, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful, film, man. And I'm just so amazed. And I was curious how that, the origins of that, story of like, how did that begin? How did you guys decide? Or was this something you said, hey, I want to film, or something your dad, or is that like, how did this come to be? And what were the kind of the beginning stages of putting that film together? And then we'll kind of dive in a little bit to, how it was put together and, obviously the 5 act, setup. And I was curious about, your thoughts going into that and directing it because you told quite a profound story. So yeah, it was just, if you wouldn't mind kind of bringing us to the beginning of how did that, first hit the table and, was a discussion point for you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So first of all, I talked earlier about being young and naive and having nothing to lose and throwing caution to the wind and rolling dice and just seeing what happens. And I got lucky, right? This time, I'm not as young as I was. I'm 38 now, and I've got mortgages, I've got kids, I've got, companies to run and people that depend on me. And so it's not, I'm a little bit more leery these days of just like kind of throwing caution to the wind and just doing, whatever I think. So I'd wanted to make, or I knew that there was a story around my dad, of course, and there has been for years. More so recently, obviously, with my mom and her. If people don't, she got lung cancer and passed away this last September. But of course, but my for the last several years, I've known that there's a documentary on Dad, no question. What I didn't know was that how I would justify the time to create a documentary like that and do it justice, right? So not just something I'd throw away, and also have it, help to, help with my other responsibilities in life, which is feeding my family and keeping the lights on and all that. So, and unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case, but we don't live in a space where, I'm not like Christopher Nolan, where I can create a movie every few years and it's on the IMAX and make millions of dollars and everybody's all happy. It's hard. It's really hard. Lots of people, again, I'm very cognizant that I'm very, I'm blessed to be in a position where I can even make a living doing creative things. So basically the conduit here was Christensen Arms wanted to do a film, and they wanted to do a film, with Dad. And I don't remember the exact way this all came about, but they asked if I want to do it, and I said, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. And so the reason this film happened the way it happened is thanks to Christensen Arms, because essentially they believed in the story and they were willing to fund it. So again, I wish that happened more often, and it's rare. But to me, again, I was now. It wasn't quite like the Cam Hanes thing with Kip, where I was just being invited to go on a hunt and I could do whatever I wanted because there wasn't any funding involved and no brands or anything like that. This is different because now I'm trying to tell Dad's story, but also I'm trying to be respectful for the brand that brought me here and not do some, I don't know, to make something great, to make something good that moves people and that that dad does justice to dad's story, but also keeps everybody, thrilled and happy. And so, including myself. So anyway, props to Christensen Arms, because we had a planning conversation, and I think they are used to working with agencies, creative agencies that are very willing to, make hard and fast statements about what they're going to film and what the story is going to be, and pre-planning stuff ahead of time. And I'm not poo-pooing that at all, but we had a conversation, and I remember specifically, they said, well, what's your plan? And I said, I don't have a plan. I'm going to take some cameras and some of my best guys, and we're going to go up there, and we're going to hang with dad for a few days, and we're going to see what happens. And they said, right, so you don't have a plan? I said, no, we don't have a plan. And they said, that's a pretty big, trust pill you're asking us to swallow. And we kind of went back and forth, and we hashed it out. And I said, I honestly, from my bottom of my heart, I think this is the best way to approach it. And I do. I don't, as we already talked about, I think you can overplan things, especially in the documentary space. Like we're not doing scripted formats here, where we've got, we don't have 100 people to try and figure out like how something's going to work and set dressing and all that. Like we don't have those luxuries. But what we do have is we have the truth. We have reality. We have an authentic angle that it always seems to get overlooked. And I kind of said all these things, and they said, okay, great. We trust you. Go do it. So we did. And so we went up there and sat with dad, and you asked about the 5 acts. There was a documentary called The Fog of War, and it's, okay. Have you seen it?
I have. Yes.
Okay, great. So that's probably my favorite documentary ever. Robert McNamara killed it. Just the way it was all put together, and what they did there is they separated that into different lessons, right? Like lessons from Robert McNamara, because this is a defense secretary for, whatever it was, over a decade. Mm-hmm. And he was privy to all these like backdoor conversations with the Soviets during the Cuban Missile Crisis and all these other issues that most of America experienced in a general sense, but he experienced because he was right there. And so he was able to tell stories from a different perspective that people weren't used to hearing. And I thought that might work very well for dad, because he's traveled the world and done these crazy hunts. And he might have something to say, that is, again, is authentically unique and a different angle than what most people would think about it. And having known dad, I knew that he's got certain beliefs, just like Cam does, that are like extreme, and not extreme in a bad way, just extreme. And that's something that I think we can take from as much or as little as we want. And so we sat down with him for, I think it was about 6 hours. It was a crazy long interview. And I just asked him question after question, trying to get, and actually I will say one thing. If you look back at like dad's hunting adventure days, right? He has a lot of, his voice is kind of like, well, here we are and welcome to the show. And today we're going to go after, he has a way of talking that I wanted to avoid in this, because I wanted to feel, I really, really, really wanted it to be very authentic to who he is. And that's not always easy to find and do when you're working with somebody like my dad, who's been in front of a camera for 30 years. So it took a while to kind of like, and also I'm coming at dad, and just like you and I are sitting right here, and I don't have any plan. I'm just asking random questions. So I'm trying to find like where the path is, what I'm trying to say, like what he wants to say, and get him to say it in like an authentic way. And that's, again, really what I'm doing is I'm just trying to prod and pick away things here and there, and then filming for a long extended period of time, and just letting dad do his thing and be real, just like kind of Cam would have done in Once for Wolves. And that's what we came out of it. So if you look at Gone, really what it is an interview with dad, and him being as real as he could possibly be. And it's easier right now because dad, has been grieving for a while, grieving in his own way, which is, different than a lot of the way, a lot of people grieve, but being a son, I know like emotionally, he's far more open right now than he ever has been. And it's been like that for the last few years with mom and everything. So, I tried to focus on that on the post side. And my editor, Jordan Bogart, is amazing. And he, again, props to him, because a lot of the editing that he did, a lot of the amazing cuts and the way that the piece flowed, like that comes from the edit side too. And he was heavily involved in that. So.
Well, and you talk a bit too about like those moments where, the unscripted, like, finding the bird and just there's
Yeah.
so many powerful things that you because this was his first trip back to the Yukon since your mother had passed, and so that was part of this idea of like following and having that part of the journey. What was that like for him, going to these places that were so spiritually deep? And I don't know if that's maybe the right word, but I mean, like being there, like he talks about, seeing your mother and feeling her in the wind, and like all like there was a place there, an imprint that has been so powerful for him, kind of a returning home base in a sense, maybe that you get that, and that I loved how you threaded through so many things, and like at the very end, you're at the Hand of Man Museum and his interaction with the young boy there, who's talking about how he's like, I'm going to tell my kids that I met you, that I was here. Because, your dad's talked to me about that museum, it being a collection of all these different things that he's brought throughout his life to share with others, the richness of cultures, of experience of art. And that idea of this whole, it seemed to be, a documentary that, encompassed his legacy. And then obviously what he's leaving behind. Because I believe that, he told me he has funds there to have hand to man for the next 30 or 40 years, right? Isn't it like it's already funded to where that will be there for future generations to behold? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, dad is like him in a lot of ways. He's extreme in certain areas, and not bad or good. And I would think mostly good, but
Yeah.
one of those things is, he wants to leave something behind. He truly, and that's, part of what he talks about in the film is what do you want to leave behind? And I think, me included, right? We go through life where I wake up in the morning, we get the kids breakfast, do the stupid dishes every day, which I hate doing. Uh,
I feel you. I feel you.
you sit at a desk, you come back, maybe there's a football game, maybe there's not. You read some bedtime stories and play some Lego or whatever, or try and hang out with your wife for a few minutes if you can, and you do it all again the next day. And we are in a sense building a legacy with our kids, right? But at some point we're going to have more time on our hands, and these are questions that I know I'm going to think about, but I don't know that everybody, including myself, thinks about it enough. Like, what do you want to leave behind? I mean, we're not going to be here forever. And Dad's personification of that is literally a museum, and it's 18,000 square foot museum. Gets like 30,000 people a year, which, by the way, it's in a tiny little town, way off the beaten path of 20,000 people, and he gets that many visitors yearly already. So it's crazy, it's insane. It's nothing to do with hunting. It's a natural history museum, effectively. And you talk about a couple moments. So of course, the moment with the child, what was his name? I can't remember now. It was completely unscripted. That we were filming the interview, and he had somebody come into the museum that he had to meet. So he kind of, I think he just got, or maybe we were rapping, I can't remember, but he got up and he was talking with them. And the school group had come in, which they do all the time, to go through the museum. And Dad started talking with them. And I was kind of, and this is, remember, we're talking about not being present, right? Trying your best not to get lost in like what's going on, because I was just kind of listening and kind of sitting there. And the kids started asking questions, and I was like, holy shit, this is actually this could be really good. This could be something we can use. Like this, what am I doing? I'm sitting here not filming. And so I ran back, and I think we're wrapping the interview. So we're been talking for 6 hours. The last thing I want to do is film more. And so I picked up the camera. One of the cameras was 2 cams. The other guys were working on disassembling stuff. And I ran back there, and I just started observing through the lens, what was going on. And that all came naturally. Nothing was scripted there. I don't even know if Dad really knew we were filming. She's just being himself. And the kids, obviously, they're just doing their thing because they're curious, and that's like we talk about being authentic. Like, kids don't know how to be anything else, right? They're not acting. They're being authentic. And when you saw that interaction between Dad and them, I'm not very good at describing this. I'm good at recognizing that it's there, but I'm not really good at telling you exactly what it is that I find interesting and moving by that. But I know when I held the camera and that kid went into the back room, was like, I want to be like you and have in this museum. And Dad said, and I know that Dad means it when he said, this is what I want to have happen. I want to inspire people to do, to make great efforts, right? To strive to be whatever it is you want to be, whatever that is. Not I'm just talking about hunting, I'm talking about anything. He believes that fundamentally. And to have a kid in there telling him that's what he's going to do. And Dad, change effectively, probably changed the trajectory of his life. that was very moving to me. And so you can't see this, but on camera, I'm actually crying as I'm filming this. So I've got tears coming down my eyes when I'm filming this whole scene take place. And I walked back into Kayla, my production partner, after that. I said, dude, I just think I just got the best scene I've ever filmed. And it was something that if I had not been in that, like that mindset of, okay, I have to tell a story, I would have just walked right by that and not thought anything of it in my life. And I think we do that all the time. Like, I think those moments happen a lot. They happen. I know I'm speaking like from my experience with myself and my kids. It happens all the time. And if someone had a camera here and they could frame that in a particular way and they could capture that and then share it, like, just because dad's Jim Shockey, like, I don't think those moments are unique to him. They're maybe potentially more powerful just because, his life is just so like insane and crazy. And his beliefs are so, again, like so extreme and fundamental and structured and strong. I think that lends itself to having like more powerful moments like that. But all of us can have and do have moments like that all the time. I think we just don't capture them or think about them unless we just let them kind of slide by.
It's true. I mean, there's so many things that happen that we're so busy and we have all these distractions, this disengagement, but like that what you captured there was such a great summation too. And I think of like that jumping post of when you talk about legacy, what's after, and here's this next generation or two generations, he's a younger child, and how profound that was for him to meet this man who doesn't, he talks about it too. He might not know your dad in the global sense of this hunter, this adventurer, this traveler. He, sees him in that element too of here's this man who has captured all this art, culture, memories, imprints of other, times and other generations and our ancestry and all the richness that's there in that 18,000 square foot, museum. And so that was something that was just amazing. And I love there's a quote there too. He said, the accomplishment is directly proportioned to the challenge. And he's talking to this kid about like how go do big things. And the kid's just like, yep, I'm going to remember this moment. And it was, I mean, I was bawling through that too, man, just thinking about like too, how there's for how powerful that must be like for your dad. And I'm sure that there's moments where he feels like those interactions happen that he's probably inspired somebody, but he's, he kind of looks at him and he's like, I see you in a way that, that connection there that kind of, spans through ages. And it's just those two human people connecting on such a profound level. It was I'm glad you went and got your camera, man. That was huge. It
Yeah.
was so powerful.
I mean, again, though, like that's, I'm trying to be clear in this. Like, that's not me saying like, let's direct this and make this all happen. It's just capturing something.
Just hit and record.
So,
yeah.
That's it. But and maybe looking at being open to the idea that, we are, all of us, I think, guilty of missing out on some moments in life that are more powerful than others. And we don't always think about it. And if you think about it, those moments will come usually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's sometimes I think what's forced when people are trying to record something in films, especially in that kind of documentary style and like that, with interaction, sometimes there's a feeling of a forcedness too when that camera's there in someone's presence where, it's sometimes it can get in the way. And sometimes when you're in the background, you have those, you're just hitting record and capturing what you capture. There's amazing how many gems you can pick up, and I want to hit another quote too that he talked about too, and just get your take on it as well. He said, we get two lives, and the second one begins when you realized you only have one. What was that moment? I'm glad you guys keyed in on that. What was that like for you when you captured that? Was that something you had heard him talk about before, or was that something that was kind of a new element at play with that kind of belief system?
Yeah. I had not heard him say that quote before. No, that was new for me, but I have talked to him about that. So I knew that's something he'd been thinking about. So two things. One is, I remember a conversation I had with dad when I had kids, and, your life, I do kind of feel like your life changes relatively dramatically after that, because now you cannot be selfish anymore. You are not, the most important thing in your.
You're not number one. Yeah.
You're like a distant number, 3 after your wife kind of thing. And so, to me, that was kind of a turning point in my life, and I certainly became a little bit more introspective then. And I remember having conversations with dad, and he's like, "Yeah, try being like you think you're thinking about that. Like, try being a grandparent. I'm a grandpa now. Like, we're your mortality is in stark relief when I think when those things happen. And then obviously with my mom, and by the way, my mom was the healthiest person ever. I mean,
Yeah.
literally lived the healthiest lifestyle, yoga every day, walked every day, ate, the like literally like the healthiest stuff you possibly could. And she walked into a doctor's clinic with a cough and walked out with, 4 months to live effectively. And that gets you thinking too about mortality. And um, so I think that's what I think, and there's the other aspect is for dad is after mom died, and this is I don't know if I want to get too deep into this, but, I never really thought much about death and particularly death of like a very close family member prior to that point and what would happen afterwards. And neither did dad, talking to him up to this point, up to that point, he said, I have no idea what's going to happen after. And actually he said, I don't know, I guess I'll take it 1 second at a time. And then when I can, I'll take it 1 minute at a time. And then I'll take it an hour at a time. And then I'll, hopefully I can take it a day at a time and maybe one day, a week at a time. Like he was just saying that your time with someone who's like and by the way, my mom and dad were as closely married and in love couple as I've ever seen. And I know I've seen comments because, he moved on quickly and all that. And that's a bunch of BS. If you knew him and
Right.
her, yeah, they were as close as there is as true of a love as you get. And he said, and basically he said like time right now is running out. And so we're going to have days, we're going to have minutes or hours, and we're going to have minutes, and then we're going to have seconds. And then, death is going to happen. And then there's going to be seconds, minutes, and hours afterwards. And we're going to try and claw our way back into life. Myself and my sister, we've got our families to come back to. And that was brutal. I mean, just terrible as it was. But dad comes back to an empty house. And so anyway, I think he was when in that quote, I think he's referencing all those things. I think he's referencing the idea that just mortality in general is going to hit you at some point being like, wow, I don't have that much longer. Like I better use the time I have really well and intentionally. And I also think he's talking about literally being effectively in some ways reborn after something like that happens. I mean, I was there. I mean, I watched my dad effectively, um, I watched one of the toughest, probably the toughest guy I know, like break basically and be reformed into something else. And it took him a while. He was finding himself for a bit after that, and he's reformed now, and he's fine. But that was as without literally being reborn like a phoenix from the ashes. Like that's about as close. Your life is kind of over. Your old life is over, and here's a new life. It'd be like getting in a crazy, I don't know, train wreck or something, and being losing everything that you cared about, and then opening your eyes one day in a hospital bed 5 years later, and you got to restart your life. If you want to, or don't restart it. And trust me, that had occurred to me as an option for dad, and he did not do that. And yeah, so I think that's what he was referencing.
When from conversation that I had with him too, and that he was encouraged by your mom to go and live his life and make his moments count and to move forward and to use their time and their legacy together. And that he said that will always be my soulmate. There's no replacement. There's nothing else. It's their they were a blueprint of what it seemed like you'd want marriage to be. And I don't know the inner and the outs, and I'm not sitting where you're sitting, but from at least the public standpoint and the way that they talked and the way that they described it and the way people commented on things throughout the time, there's that love that was there was so pure and pristine and just so beautiful. And I know that he wants to honor her with his every day when he walks forward, and he still does. And so, I don't care what comments are there. Those are people who don't know stuff. But there was a comment on that particular film, because I know you released Gone on Cam Haynes's platform on his YouTube page, and there
Mhm.
was a guy. Have you looked at the comments on that?
Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
So the very first lead one that I don't know if it's got pinned or if it's just got so many comments that it kind of became naturally pinned was a guy who is depressed,
Yeah.
battling thoughts of suicide, and he talked about how that film changed him and helped to make him want to stick around and have an impactful life and impact others and move through his losses and all the things that had gone through. And it was just, there's outpouring of so much support for your dad and so much thanks for people who saw that and were inspired by that film that you directed and you put together. I mean, it's been one of the more beautiful things. Like you see comments on YouTube that are just, whatever people post. And a lot of times you're like, ah, man, it goes negative by like comment 2 or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just scrolling through hundreds of people who left, their amazing, strong, profound feelings and responses to that film. And I feel like there's, that legacy of that your father has made, the legacy that you're doing through film. I I see the importance of those through these moments of being able to have those reflections of those folks talk about how that film, his life has, impacted them in so many amazing ways. And that was just, I mean, it was kind of reading through them, I was tearing up, man. I'm like, wow, like so much beauty there, so much beauty that you put in the film, so much beautiful things that they've had and they share with their life with your parents, and just the journey too of, at one point in time, we're going to be sitting at the end and, thinking about our own legacies that we leave behind. And that kind of brings me to a question with you is, what's your view and your take on legacy? Is this something that you walk through in a day-to-day thinking about that? Have you reflected on that and how you want to, leave your mark imprint for your family, for the rest of the world, for your friends, for yourself? How do you view your own legacy?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the comments about the film.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And again, I'm sitting there holding a camera, and it's mostly covering what's just there in reality. But that is a good question. I don't know that I walk around and think about it super actively, but I absolutely think about. Well, I mean, like I looked through all those comments, so I think there's like, yeah, whatever, 700 of them, something. And the comments are amazing. They really are. And I want to be very clear in something. When I did, Gone, right? At no point did I know for sure that it was going to move people. So I think you mentioned the pigeon scene. I mean, that's just dad catching a pigeon. It's really, and even when I was filming, I was like, should I really be bothering capturing this? Because it's really interesting to people. And I had to kind of trust myself and be like, I think it's interesting. I think it's beautiful, actually. And that's a term that I think, like we don't use enough, is like beauty and something, beauty in life, right? And I'm not always like this, but at my best, I think that I have, for whatever reason, I have an ability to find and target beautiful things in life, and look at things that are mundane and say, no, actually, this is really beautiful if you think about it. I was listening to, what was it? An interview with Zach Bryan, does the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's unbelievable, a great, amazing songwriter.
Incredible.
I listened to an interview he did with Joe Rogan. He was talking about that. I was like, these are my exact thoughts, Zach, because he's talking like, he's saying, the I think you said statue, no, the Empire State Building. I was like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I totally agree. It's a beautiful thing. And, we're so focused on the Empire State Building is 1,500 feet high. And it's, it was built in 1922, and 3 people died. But those are just like stats. I don't want the stats. I want like the real authentic stuff, the emotional stuff. Like that's where we find, to me, that's what's interesting. And why we get emotional about certain things, and what I can seek out in the world, and then hopefully share with people like I did with Gone, that will move them like it moves me. And I think it's cooler than heck that I can film a dad catching a pigeon and have people respond to that in the way that I love. Again, and I'm very blessed to have sort of like a built-in platform to be able to do those things, because unfortunately now I find, anyway, and this is not a complaint, it just is the way the world is, but it's difficult to do that in a 15-second TikTok video. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not on TikTok. I'm just not. I don't think I'm capable of doing beautiful things or doing what I want to do, being who I want to be on a platform like that, with media like that, unfortunately. So, um, in terms of legacy, I don't know if I like the word legacy. To me, I want to do two things. I want to continue providing for my family while also doing creative endeavors that I find personally fulfilling and that hopefully help fulfill other people in ways that maybe they don't think about. So, yeah, that comment that where the guy said he's depressed and that this video potentially changed his life trajectory. I mean, heck yeah, sign me up. Like that's so fulfilling to me, way more than like paychecks or the view count on YouTube or whatever. Like, yeah, I just changed some. I helped anyway, and changed someone's life, and that's. I don't know what more you could ask for, and I did it in a way that I was able to do in a way that's beautiful to me. Um, the other comments, like talking about the pigeon and all that. I keep going back to that, but
Yeah.
they see beauty in that, and just like I do, and I'm like, well, those are might be like I think like that. I truly do. In my best moments, not all the time, but sometimes when I'm thinking clearly, and I find beauty in the world, and I love. I'm very honored and blessed to be able to share that sometimes. Um, the second thing is, so I want to continue to do that. The second thing I want to do is there are other creatives, right? I was doing actually when we aired Gone, we did it like in a Bass Pro Shops here and had a big giant theater and there's 200 people there and they all came to watch. And afterwards, Dad and I went up on stage and people would ask questions. And we did a poll and I asked everybody in the audience, like, how many people do creative work, as part of what they do for a living. And I think there was like one person that raised their hand. And I think it was like the event photographer or something, nobody else. And I thought, it made me realize how fortunate I have been to be in a position where I am able to, be in an industry that does value creative work. Right? Like if my dad was a finance dude, finance master, I mean, I would never have done this. I'm sure of that. That path was partially forged for me already when I was born into the outdoor industry. So I would like to change that number. I don't want it to be one person putting their hand up. I want it to be 10 or 50 or 100. I want it to be as many people um, being fulfilled through creative endeavors that want to be. Not everybody wants to do creative things. I totally understand that. I get it. And I very much respect it actually, because there's a honor that I recognize in, being the stoic person that my grandpa worked crazy long days doing really unhealthy stuff, building roads in the middle of Saskatchewan for years and decades, and that's it. He literally dreamed about building roads at night, and I don't. Maybe there's some creative aspects to that. There probably isn't like a ton, and I have so much respect for that because he did it not for himself. He did it for his family, and he did it for the future of his kids, and like talk about a legacy. Like there's honor in that, and so I'm not at all saying creativity has to trump everything else at all. I'm just saying, to me, like our ability to like, what's the word, um not ingenious, I can't think of it, but our ability to be creative is unique to us. It makes us, in my mind, human. It makes life more interesting and yes, more beautiful. And I would love to help create a path for people to be able to express that and still, ideally be able to provide for the family and live, balanced lives and everything. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that necessarily. I like to spread the word. I'd like to. That's why I'm very open in the way that I approach projects and our creative business, because I want other people to be inspired by that. I want them to go and do that. And if people message me online, I always take time. I try my best to write exactly what I think back to them and not worry about the time it takes me to do that. Maybe I'll do a I don't know, filmmaking camp or storytelling camp or something someday. But yeah, I want the world to be uh, a more opportunistic place for creatives.
That's an amazing answer. Wow. I'm almost speechless, man. It's amazing. Like I really I think there's a lot to unpack with that, and I'm really thankful that you shared that and shared that vision for that idea of having more creative. I think we need to have as many of these beautiful moments captured, shared, experienced as possible, and I think it takes things like that. You're not going to get those in the 15-second clips. Yeah, maybe there's some in there,
Yeah,
some wow
I don't want to say it's
moments. Yeah,
impossible because I think it
yeah.
is, but I don't know how to do it.
I think sometimes some of the more profound things we see take time to weave together and put together the stories and to understand the complexities and the deep, intricate value and beauty of those moments in our lives that we share. And I want to tip my hat to you once again for all that you've put out, all of the amazing work that you've been a part of, and the end result of what it is you're sharing, because it's so profound, it's so incredible. I just find you to be an amazing filmmaker and just a great human. Like when I told your dad that I was going to have you on the podcast, he said he's one of the greatest humans. Like, and I was just like, it just full stop. And I was like, what a great sentence and what a great thing to say about someone, just a beautiful human. And I find that to be, and you're putting out things that I can't wait to see what you're doing next and what you share. And I just want to thank you for following and honoring the path the way that you do, and leaving room for all those amazing moments to come through. Um, with that, I'd like to, have you share where people can go ahead and, like I said, I'll have the films that we spoke about today. There'll be a direct link here in the show notes below, so I encourage everyone to go and check those out. You have to go see those two films that we just discussed, and the other ones that you've put together as well, and your journey with your dad. But as far as people want to go and kind of make sure that they're have their thumb on what you're doing next, and some of your journey and things that you share on socials, what are the best places for people to follow you there?
First of all, thank you for all those words, George. Best place is honestly Instagram. Although I will say I do not post as much as I should. And my sister's been telling me for years I need to post more, and I should have. And I'll go through stints where I'll post like 100 different stories in a day sometimes when I'm really inspired and we're kind of on the road doing funny stuff. And then I'll every once in a while write like a longer post. But yeah, Instagram is probably the best. I am putting a website together that'll have all the more like the sort of the work we've been doing, because actually 90% of stuff we do I don't even mention or post about. It just kind of goes into the cyberspace. So I want to start, and this kind of like plays back to what you're saying about, or what I was saying about leaving a little bit more behind. I want to inspire creatives, but also I want to show that it's possible to be creative and create value for others. And so the website's going to be part of that, hopefully. But yeah, Instagram is the best place.
So is that something you're in the midst of working on? You have the URL. I mean, you don't have to say it yet, because if those who want to follow you, I'm sure you'll announce it on Instagram. But is that something that's coming soon? Is that in the near future?
Yeah, well, my production partner, so Caleb Marmolejo is an incredible creative. Thinks like I do. He's a ridiculous photographer. Actually, kind of makes me jealous. So I stopped taking photos after working with him. But he and I have this dream. It's kind of along what we've been talking about, to create a more than a network of creatives that are more than the sum of their parts. And so we're working on that. So it's called Big Peak, and it should be coming up pretty quickly. Actually, I don't mind if you talk about it, because they'll incentivize me to actually launch the website and write about it. So
Good deal. Well, that's coming soon. So there you go.
there you go. Yeah.
Well, listen, Branlin, I just want to say thank you again for coming and joining me today, for sharing everything that you do. You are a beautiful human, man, and you're sharing so many beautiful things. And I'm very appreciative that there's people like you out there. You're inspiring. What the films you put together, they're just so profound, man. They really hit the heart. And I'm just so thankful to be able to have this interaction, and to have you on the show, and to share some of the things that you've put in the world with all the listeners. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me on, George. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, you take care. You have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Cheers.